President-elect Donald Trump values loyalty, and no one has been more loyal through the peaks and valleys of the campaign than Rudy Giuliani. Despite a thin resume on foreign affairs, the former mayor who guided New York through the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks appears to be the favorite to be the next Secretary of State. Another frontrunner, former UN Ambassador John Bolton, who was in the news last year for writing an op-ed piece entitled, "To Stop Iran's Bomb, Bomb Iran."
I'm going to ask you some questions about...
John would be a very good choice.
Is there anybody better?
Maybe me, I don't know.
It looks like no one will know as quickly as originally expected. The transition team got mired in internal squabbles today. This former Congressman Mike Rogers, an expert on national security, resigned from the team or was forced off. Now, throughout the campaign, Trump tended to speak in generalities about foreign policy, focusing on the need to project more strength abroad. On 60 Minutes this past Sunday, he still wouldn't give specifics on how he'd fight ISIS.
You have said that you're going to destroy ISIS. Now, how are you going to destroy?
I don't tell you that. I don't tell you that.
Yeah,
I'm not like the people going in right now and fighting Mosul, and they announced it 4 months before they went into Mosul, and everybody now it's a tough fight because, number one, the people from the leaders of ISIS have left.
In his final overseas trip, President Obama, called Trump's first ambassador by Politico, is seeking to assure nervous allies that the incoming administration will honor most existing commitments.
I think that's one of the most important functions I can serve at this stage during this trip, is to let them know that there is no weakening of resolve when it comes to America's commitment to maintaining a strong and robust NATO relationship, and a recognition that those alliances aren't just good for Europe, they're good for the United States.
Joining me to interpret all this, I hope, are Charlie Sennett of the Ground Truth Project here at GBH. Charlie, good to see you. And Jim Walsh, a research associate at MIT Security Studies Program. Jim, good to see you again, too. Briefly, without editorializing yet, can you describe what you think is Trump's foreign policy doctrine? I mean, if you don't have any idea.
I never editorialize, I hope, but I think really, truly, the idea is we are dealing with someone who is unqualified when it comes to foreign affairs. The lack of sophistication he shows on one issue after another is really hard to come up with anything that's consistent.
Thank goodness you're not editorializing.
Because his speeches are here, there, and everywhere.
What do you think he laid out in the campaign?
Honestly, truly, it's not editorializing to talk about a lack of experience. That's a reality of this gentleman who has been elected to be the next president of the United States.
What's the doctrine? Is there one?
I think the doctrine is about pulling back, pulling in, about trying to say we need to focus on this country very, very clearly.
America first.
And very broadly saying we can't worry about the whole world, and we're not going to. And when we do focus on the world, we're going to be tough and aggressive and hit hard, as he promises in his secret plan to do with ISIS.
Do you agree with that analysis?
I agree with both of you, because we saw more than one Donald Trump in the campaign. We saw sort of an isolationist, didn't want to have foreign entanglements, big wars in the Middle East, but then a lot of talk about we've got to make the military bigger and stronger. So it's very hard to predict by his words almost anything, because he took different positions on the same issue. But I will say, Donald Trump, the man, he himself has said he's a counterpuncher. We're not talking about a guy who's a grand strategist, who has a vision of the 21st century.
They come at us, we come at them.
Right, he's going to react, he's not going to.
Well, for both of you to say we really don't know what the outline is yet, if Rudy Giuliani ends up being the Secretary of State, does that tell us more or about his foreign policy, or does it just tell us he's loyal to a guy who is loyal to him? Does it tell us anything?
I think it does tell us something more. One, it tells us it's not John Bolton, who is a unreconstructed neocon from previous administrations. Right. Plus, Giuliani gave a speech at the Wall Street Journal today where he outlined some of his positions were he to be Secretary of State, and he said his priority would be ISIS, more ISIS than reneging on the Iran deal, and talked about setting priorities.
Let's talk about ISIS for a minute, since your intimation a minute ago was, like Hillary Clinton said, the reason this plan is a secret is because there's no plan. Do you buy that, or is he just being strategic?
I think he doesn't have a plan. I think it's really hard to know what to do there without having a very sophisticated regional approach to this. The Iran deal is part of that. Understanding the Sunni-Shia divide is part of that. Understanding how you fight a counterterrorism campaign and inform the public around that campaign to be ready for it. These are real issues for people who really know what they're doing on the ground, from people like General Petraeus straight through to the people who are executing in Mosul now. He's never revealed a sophistication or an ability to talk that through. Now, does he surround himself with good generals, people who are capable and competent, then you could have a sophisticated plan. Right now, there's a black box.
Can you find any plan in there, or are you with Charlie Sennett on this?
I don't think there's a plan. I think, obviously all the reports are that the transition is going slowly. They're going to be behind. The names floated for appointments are very different people. They represent very different policies. Plus, we've already had turnover, right? We've already had Chris Christie demoted, and then we saw Chairman Rogers, Mike Rogers, leave today. I expect there'll be more of that.
Which also may be another Christie connection, too, by the way.
Absolutely.
One quick thing just to add, that one thing we haven't talked about that I think is really important in his foreign policy is one place we do know what he's going to do, and that is on trade. And that's an important piece of foreign policy, and I think he really is going to change the game in terms of
which got
trade
a lot
agreements.
of Democratic support,
right?
And
I think that's real. We're going to see if that really pans out.
Does he finally had his phone call with Vladimir Putin yesterday? Is having a better relationship with Russia not a good thing?
Well, I'd say quickly two things. One, it's better to cooperate with great power. When great powers cooperate, they have a better chance of settling world problems. But number two, and no one talks about this, and I feel compelled to say it, we had a foreign country that our intelligence agency tells us interfered with a U.S. election, tried to put a thumb on the balance and get their person elected, and they did, and no one cares.
And there are people who surround Trump who have been actively involved and on the payroll
Paul Manafort,
of people
his former
connected
campaign
to, this,
chair,
to Putin. Look, I think to give countenance to a thug and someone who is as anti-democratic and anti-humanitarian as Putin is troubling, and it needs to be really closely watched. And we still don't have those tax returns, and we still should know, is there any money that flowed through to Trump?
I want to fly quickly through a couple more things. We're running short on time. Speaking of Putin, he doesn't want to see NATO expand in Eastern Europe. We know Donald Trump has questioned the contributions of the NATO thing. Barack Obama has assured, I guess, the world in the last 24 hours, don't worry, I've talked to him. He's going to honor the commitment. Are you buying that, both of you?
I think he did change his position on the South Korean alliance. I think he'll stick with NATO, but I don't think we'll see expansion of NATO. I think that we'll see that issue tuned down, the things that are happening in Ukraine and
So let me move on
elsewhere.
if I can. You were in Marrakesh. We talked to you on the radio live from Marrakesh. Obviously, COP22 was
Correct.
following Paris in December. He has said unequivocally one of the things he's going to cancel is this deal. People like Bernie Sanders said the greatest threat to international security. Very quickly, can he do it, and what are the consequences of it?
It'll be hard to do. It will take 4 years. The way we understand the agreement, we have reporters on the ground in Marrakesh right now.
Great young reporters.
They are really studying this, and what they're finding out is that it's an interlocking set of commitments. It would be hard to get out of it within 4 years. But if he reneges on it and wants to break the entire framework of working with the United Nations, he could be out of it in a year. That would be disastrous for the world, because if there's one issue that can be set aside as not partisan, it's climate change. 22 years of work into this. We're going to see a really important speech tomorrow by Secretary of State John Kerry from Marrakesh that I think he's going to lay out the land.
Lifelong commitment to this very issue.
And I think he's really going to say, this is why we all need to care.
Jim, we only have 15 seconds. Is it not possible, despite the lack of experience you both talked about, that his deal-making skills, which some think are legendary, some think are phony, might suit him well in international relations?
It may be. If they're there, it may be. Most presidents do not come to office with a lot of foreign policy experience. President Obama did not have a lot of foreign policy experience.
Fine point. Charlie Sennett, nice to
Great.
see you.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim, pleasure. Thank
Take
you
care.
so much for your time. I appreciate it.